Good evening. Day 12, telling stories every night until I get a girlfriend. Tonight, we travel back to the golden age of House Targaryen, a time when dragons ruled the skies, a time of prosperity, and the beginning of a conflict that would eventually tear the House of the Dragon apart. This is the story of House of the Dragon Season 1. Chapter 1. The Heirs of the Dragon. The story begins at the apex of Targaryen power, during the twilight of the reign of King Viserys I. The old king had ruled Westeros for over half a century in peace, but tragedy had stripped him of his sons, leaving the succession in deep peril. To avert a civil war, the old king summoned the Great Council of 101 AC at the massive seat of Harrenhal. Lords from every corner of the Seven Kingdoms gathered to debate a foundational question: who should inherit the Iron Throne? The two primary claimants were Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, the daughter of Jaehaerys' eldest deceased son, and Prince Viserys Targaryen, her younger cousin. Rhaenys possessed the stronger claim by strict lineage, but she was a woman. Viserys, though born of a younger line, was the eldest male descendant. The Great Council ultimately chose Viserys, establishing a precedent that the Iron Throne could not pass to a woman, nor through a woman to her male descendants. Jaehaerys passed away soon after, leaving Viserys to inherit a realm at peace, yet shadowed by the structural fissures of that decision. 9 years into King Viserys' reign, the question of succession loomed once more. The king, gentle but conflict-averse, was desperate for a male heir to secure his line. His devoted wife, Queen Aemma Arryn, had endured multiple failed pregnancies, leaving them with only one living child, the spirited and independent Princess Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra, a Dragonrider who flew the golden beast Syrax, spent her days serving as her father's cupbearer, observing the subtle machinations of the small council. Across the table sat Otto Hightower, the hand of the king, a calculating and meticulously proper bureaucrat who viewed the king's erratic brother, Prince Daemon, as an existential threat to the stability of the realm. Daemon, the commander of the City Watch, was a tempestuous warrior who wielded the ancestral Valyrian steel blade, Dark Sister. He had refashioned the gold-cloaked guardsmen into a brutal, highly disciplined paramilitary force, enforcing a bloody brand of justice across the slums of King's Landing. To celebrate the Queen's imminent labor, Viserys announced a Grand Heirs tournament, drawing knights from across Westeros. The atmosphere in the capital was thick with anticipation and tension. In the lists, Sir Criston Cole, a low-born knight of Dornish descent from the Marches, stunned the court by unhorsing Prince Daemon in a fierce engagement. But as blood spilled on the tourney grounds, a far more harrowing battle unfolded within the walls of the Red Keep. Queen Aemma's labor was disastrously prolonged. The child was breech, and Grand Maester Mellos informed the king that a choice had to be made: attempt an unprecedented, violent surgical extraction to save the infant, which would guarantee the mother's agonizing death, or lose both. Blindsided by grief and desperate for his prophetic vision of a male heir to come true, Viserys gave his consent. The sequence that followed contrasted the brutal violence of the joust with the horrific, forced cesarean section performed on Queen Aemma. Bound to her bed, terrified and weeping, the queen bled to death as her son was cut from her womb. The tragedy compounded within hours when the infant, named Baelon, perished as well. A pall of grief settled over the Red Keep. At the funeral pyre outside the city, A devastated Rhaenyra spoke the command Dracarys, ordering Syrax to consume her mother and infant brother in dragon flame, while her father stood hollowed by guilt. In the immediate wake of the funeral, the political vacuum demanded action. Prince Daemon, expecting to be formally recognized as the legal heir, instead spent the night carousing in a Silk Street brothel with his mistress, Mysaria. During the revelry, he mockingly toasted the deceased infant as the heir for a day. Otto Hightower's spies quickly reported these callous words to the king. Enraged and deeply wounded by his brother's apparent cruelty, Viserys summoned Daemon to the Iron Throne room. After a bitter confrontation regarding loyalty, duty, and ambition, the king banished Daemon back to his estranged wife in the Vale. Recognizing the urgent need to stabilize the succession and shut out his volatile brother, Viserys made a historic decision that shattered the precedent of the Great Council of 101 AC. He named his daughter, Princess Rhaenyra, as his official heir. In the Great Hall of the Red Keep, the lords of Westeros, including Lord Boromund Baratheon and Lord Corlys Velaryon, knelt and swore solemn oaths of fealty to the young princess. To solidify this transition, Viserys shared a deeply held secret with Rhaenyra, the Song of Ice and Fire. He revealed that Aegon the Conqueror had not invaded Westeros out of mere ambition, but because of a prophetic dream predicting a terrible darkness emerging from the distant north. Aegon foresaw that a Targaryen must sit upon the Iron Throne to unite the realm against this existential threat. With this heavy dynastic burden placed upon her shoulders, Rhaenyra's path as future queen was set. Chapter 2. The Rogue Prince. 6 months passed, and the fragile peace of the realm began to fray along its geographic edges. In the Stepstones, a crucial cluster of islands in the Narrow Sea, a terrifying Myrish prince admiral named Kragas Drahar, known notoriously as the Crab Feeder, had begun systematically capturing Westerosi merchant ships. Backed by the Triarchy of Myre, Lys, and Tyrosh, Drahar left captured sailors pinned to the beaches to be drowned by the rising tides and devoured by crabs. Lord Corlys Velaryon, the Sea Snake and master of ships, grew increasingly furious at the Crown's inaction. His family's immense wealth and naval dominance were heavily dependent on those trade lanes, yet King Viserys and his small council preferred cautious diplomatic maneuvering over open warfare, fearing a costly conflict with the free cities. Meanwhile, internal fractures deepened within the capital. Otto Hightower, quietly pursuing his own dynastic ambitions, subtly engineered a scheme to position his young daughter, Lady Alicent, closer to the grieving king. Under the guise of offering comfort, Alicent was directed by her father to visit Viserys in his private chambers, wearing her late mother's gowns. She spent evenings reading to the lonely monarch, listening to his grief, and helping him repair his elaborate stone model of old Valyria. This secret companionship remained hidden from Rhaenyra, who considered Alicent her closest confidant and sole emotional anchor at court. The political equilibrium shattered entirely when news arrived from Dragonstone. Prince Daemon, furious over his exile, had seized the ancient Targaryen island fortress with his loyal gold cloaks and his formidable dragon, Caraxes. Furthermore, Daemon had stolen a golden dragon egg, the very egg that had been chosen for the late Prince Baelon, and announced his intention to take Mysaria as a second wife, claiming she was pregnant with his child. This open defiance was calculated to provoke his brother. Viserys, incensed by the insult to his dead son's memory, prepared to send an armed force, but Otto Hightower volunteered to lead the contingent himself, eager to confront the rogue prince. On the foggy, wind-swept causeway of Dragonstone, the two factions faced off. Otto Hightower stood with a detachment of royal guards, demanding the return of the egg and Daemon's surrender. Daemon, flanked by his gold cloaks, mocked the Hand and drew Dark Sister. The tension escalated dramatically when Caraxes slid down the volcanic rocks, breathing smoke and terrifying the royal soldiers. Just as bloodshed seemed completely unavoidable, the golden form of Syrax pierced the heavy mist. Rhaenyra had flown to Dragonstone without her father's permission. Demonstrating remarkable political poise and bravery, she confronted her uncle directly. She challenged him to strike her down if he truly wished to claim the succession by blood. Daemon, unwilling to harm his niece and recognizing her audacity, relented. He tossed the dragon egg to her and retreated into the fortress, diffusing the immediate crisis without a single drop of blood. Upon her return to King's Landing, Rhaenyra faced her father's anxiety, but her swift resolution of the crisis impressed him. However, the pressure on Viserys to remarry was mounting daily. Lord Corlys Velaryon and his wife, Princess Rhaenys, presented a powerful dynastic proposition: a marriage between the king and their 12-year-old daughter, Lyanna Velaryon. This union would heal the rift caused by the Great Council of 101 AC, unite the realm's two most powerful Valyrian houses, and combine the Crown's dragons with the Velaryon fleet. Viserys dutifully walked the gardens with the young Lyanna, but he found himself deeply uncomfortable with her age and the transparent political transaction. Ultimately, during a momentous small council meeting, Viserys blindsided everyone by announcing his decision. While he acknowledged the strategic necessity of a new marriage, he chose to follow his personal desire rather than geopolitical duty. He declared that he would marry Lady Alicent Hightower. This announcement caused an immediate explosion within the court. Lord Corlys walked out of the council chamber in a fit of absolute rage, viewing the rejection as a calculated insult to House Velaryon. Rhaenyra sat frozen, looking at her best friend, feeling utterly betrayed by both her father and the girl she trusted most. The alliance that had held the court together was severed. Driven by shared resentment, Lord Corlys traveled back to Driftmark and formed a dangerous alliance with Prince Daemon, offering the strength of his fleet to back Daemon's dragons in an unauthorized war against the Crab Feeder in the Stepstones. Chapter 3, second of his name. 3 years of brutal, grinding warfare passed in the Stepstones. The allied forces of Daemon Targaryen and Corlys Velaryon found themselves bogged down in a miserable war of attrition. The Crab Feeder and his men used the deep, complex cave networks of the islands to shelter from dragonfire, emerging only at night to ambush the Westerosi forces and destroy their ships. The financial and human toll was devastating, and morale among the Valyrian soldiers was rapidly collapsing. In King's Landing, the landscape of the court had transformed dramatically. Queen Alicent had given birth to a healthy, silver-haired son named Aegon, and she was already heavily pregnant with her second child, Helaena. The birth of a male heir completely altered the political calculus of the realm. The lords of Westeros began to quietly assume that the king would inevitably set Rhaenyra aside in favor of his firstborn son, as tradition dictated. This atmosphere of gossip and shifting loyalties deeply alienated Rhaenyra, who felt increasingly isolated and resentful of her stepmother. To celebrate Prince Aegon's second name day, the king organized a grand royal hunt in the Kingswood. The event was designed to be a joyous display of unity, but it instead exposed the deep political divisions tearing at the court. lords openly toasted Aegon as the future king, while Otto Hightower worked tirelessly behind the scenes to convince Viserys to officially alter the succession. Viserys, increasingly dependent on wine to dull his chronic physical ailments and internal stress, grew furious at the relentless badgering. During the hunt, word arrived that a rare white hart, the ancient symbol of royalty and kingship in Westeros, had been sighted in the woods. Many took this as a divine omen that the gods favored young Aegon's claim over Rhaenyra's. Overwhelmed by the oppressive expectations of the court and her father's implied doubts, Rhaenyra fled the royal camp on horseback. She was pursued and comforted by Sir Criston Cole, who had been appointed to the Kingsguard at her personal request. The two spent the night deep in the wilderness, camping by a fire. In the darkness, they were suddenly attacked by a wild boar. Sir Criston fought the beast, but it was Rhaenyra who ultimately killed it, venting her pent-up fury by repeatedly stabbing the animal. The following morning, as they prepared to return, the majestic white hart appeared before them. Rather than letting Criston kill it, Rhaenyra locked eyes with the noble beast and allowed it to run free. When she returned to the camp with the carcass of the boar, she did so with a quiet, renewed sense of her own destiny. Meanwhile, the royal hunters failed to find the white hart, capturing a common brown stag instead, which Viserys executed in a clumsy, uninspired fashion. Later that evening, Viserys sat with Alicent, broken down by the relentless political pressure. He confessed his own past doubts, admitting that he had been driven by guilt over Aemma's death when he named Rhaenyra, but he swore that he would not alter his decision. He promised Rhaenyra directly that she would remain his heir, though he urged her to find a husband to secure her own position. At the same time, urgent dispatches arrived from the Stepstones. Lord Corlys's brother, Sir Daemon Valerian, begged the king for military intervention, warning that their forces faced imminent total defeat. Alicent convinced Viserys to send aid, arguing that allowing Daemon to fail would weaken the global prestige of the crown. Viserys relented and sent a royal fleet with provisions and fresh soldiers. When the king's messenger arrived at the desperate Valerian war camp on the shores of the Stepstones, Daemon received the letter. The missive stated that his brother was sending ships and men to rescue his failing campaign. For Daemon, this offer of help was the ultimate insult. It implied that he could not win his own war without his brother's pity. In a fit of wild fury, Daemon beat the royal messenger half to death with his helmet. Driven by raw pride and desperation, Daemon conceived a suicidal strategy. He rode alone to the shores of the crab feeder's stronghold, waving a white flag of surrender. The Triarchy soldiers, sensing a historic prize, cautiously emerged from their caves by the hundreds. Just as they surrounded him, Daemon drew Dark Sister and began a ferocious solo slaughter, carving his way through the enemy ranks while dodging volleys of arrows. As he was pinned down, the Valerian forces launched a massive surprise ambush. Sea Smoke, ridden by Corlys's brave son Laenor Velaryon, rained dragonfire from above, incinerating the Triarchy lines and cutting off their retreat. Daemon pursued Kragas Drahar into the deep, dark caves. Moments later, he emerged back onto the beach, drenched from head to toe in black blood, dragging the severed torso of the crab feeder. The war was won, and Daemon had secured his reputation as an unstoppable force of nature. Chapter 4, Episodes 4 and 5. Following his bloody triumph in the Stepstones, Prince Daemon returned to King's Landing. He appeared before the court during a grand feast, wearing a crown of driftwood and carrying the title King of the Narrow Sea. In a shocking display of theatricality, he knelt before his brother and surrendered his crown to the Iron Throne, declaring his absolute loyalty. Viserys, deeply moved and eager for reconciliation, embraced his brother, welcoming him back into the heart of the capital. The peace, however, was incredibly short-lived. Rhaenyra had spent the intervening months on a tedious, state-mandated tour of the realm, rejecting dozens of arrogant lords who sought her hand in marriage. She returned to court deeply frustrated by her lack of personal autonomy. That night, Daemon slipped into her chambers, giving her common clothing to disguise herself. He snuck her out of the secure walls of the Red Keep into the vibrant, chaotic nightlife of King's Landing. He exposed her to the raw, visceral world of the common folk, taking her to an avant-garde street play that openly mocked her succession, and eventually leading her into a pleasure house in the heart of Silk Street. Surrounded by the unabashed hedonism of the brothel, Daemon kissed Rhaenyra, introducing her to the intoxicating blur of desire and power. However, overcome by his own complex psychological demons and a sudden reluctance to fully compromise his niece, Daemon abruptly abandoned her in the brothel and vanished into the night. Confused, abandoned, and intensely aroused, Rhaenyra returned to her private quarters in the Red Keep. There, she seduced her loyal protector, Sir Criston Cole, for Criston, breaking his sacred vows of chastity as a knight of the Kingsguard, was a profound, soul-shattering transgression. For Rhaenyra, it was an assertion of her own desire and agency. The political fallout from that night was instantaneous and devastating. Otto Hightower's network of spies, including the white worm Mysaria, immediately reported that the princess had been seen engaging in illicit acts with her uncle in a public pleasure house. Otto, seizing what he perceived as the ultimate opportunity to permanently ruin Rhaenyra's claim, delivered the scandalous news directly to the king. Viserys, though shattered, refused to be manipulated. He accused Otto of fabricating the vile rumor solely to advance his grandson Aegon's prospects. Viserys ordered Grand Maester Mellos to deliver a preventative draft of moon tea to Rhaenyra's chambers to quietly handle any physical consequences of her actions. But his trust in his hand was broken. Recognizing Otto's insatiable, calculated ambition, Viserys stripped him of his chain of office, dismissing him as Hand of the King. To repair the deep rift with House Velaryon and secure the realm's defense, Viserys sailed directly to Driftmark to arrange a political marriage between Rhaenyra and Sir Laenor Velaryon. During the voyage, the king's health declined further, his body visibly rotting from a mysterious, systemic illness. At high tide, the ancestral seat of House Velaryon, the marriage contract was finalized. Rhaenyra and Laenor, who both understood the rigid constraints of their duties, reached a private, pragmatic understanding. Laenor was homosexual, deeply in love with his companion, Sir Joffrey Lonmouth. Rhaenyra proposed that they perform their public duties flawlessly to satisfy the realm, but remained free to follow their own private desires once their dynastic obligations were met. On the journey back, Sir Criston Cole, consumed by intense guilt and romantic delusion, made a desperate proposal to Rhaenyra. He begged her to abandon her claim to the throne, escape with him on a ship to Essos, and live a life of freedom and love. Rhaenyra gently but firmly rejected his offer, explaining that she was bound by duty to the Iron Throne and could not run away. She suggested they continue their clandestine affair, but Criston was deeply insulted. He felt he had soiled his knightly honor for a princess who viewed him merely as a hidden paramour. Before leaving the capital, a disgraced Otto Hightower delivered a final, poisonous warning to his daughter, Queen Alicent. He warned her that if Rhaenyra ever ascended the throne, she would be forced to execute Alicent's children to eliminate any rival lines of succession. This warning completely transformed Alicent's worldview. Seeking the truth about the rumors, she summoned Sir Criston Cole, subtly questioning him about Rhaenyra and Daemon. Criston, misinterpreting her inquiries and overwhelmed by his own guilt, completely confessed to his sexual liaison with the princess. Alicent was horrified. She realized Rhaenyra had lied to her face, and her own steadfast adherence to duty had left her politically vulnerable. The tension culminated at the grand welcome feast in King's Landing, meant to kick off days of wedding celebrations. The royal family sat at the high table. Halfway through the king's opening address, the doors swung open. Queen Alicent marched into the hall, deliberately interrupting the king, wearing a stunning, vibrant green gown. Larys Strong, the cunning son of the new hand. Lionel Strong leaned over and noted that green was the traditional color beacon of House Hightower when calling its banners to war. The political factions of the court were drawn in that exact moment. Later in the evening, Sir Joffrey Lonmouth, having deduced Sir Criston's secret relationship with Rhaenyra, foolishly approached the knight. He suggested that they both guard their respective lovers' secrets carefully to protect the arrangement. Criston, already pushed to a psychological breaking point by shame, betrayal, and humiliation, snapped completely. A violent brawl erupted in the center of the crowded hall. Criston tackled Joffrey to the floor and brutally beat him to death with his bare hands, transforming the celebration into a horrific scene of blood and screaming. Laenor wept openly over his lover's mangled corpse. Later that very night, in a hollowed-out, somber ceremony, amidst the blood-stained floor of the throne room, Rhaenyra and Laenor were wed. Viserys, watching his daughter say her vows, collapsed to the stone floor as his nose bled profusely, his body failing under the weight of his collapsing family and the fracturing realm. Meanwhile, in the Godswood, Sir Criston Cole prepared to commit ritual suicide to escape his dishonor. He was stopped at the last second by Queen Alicent, who claimed his loyalty, forging an alliance that would shape the future of the kingdom. And so, the first chapter of this story comes to an end. The dragons still rule the skies, the greens and the blacks stand on opposite sides, and the peace of Westeros hangs by a thread. But the true war has only just begun. Tomorrow night, we will continue this tale in part 2 and witness the devastating conflict that would become known as the Dance of the Dragons. Until then, rest well and sleep peacefully.